struggle with the most during your teenage years, and how did you overcome it?
So, to get specific, I think the biggest challenge for me when I was a teenager was honestly body image. And I think more than, just having poor body image, it was that I placed such an enormous emphasis on my body in terms of what I drew my value from as a human being. Because I think a lot of teenage girls, I think there's just a lot of pressure that comes from social media, that comes from athletics, a lot of different things about just being a girl that I felt like my early years of my life, I was constantly worried about my body, like at dance or gymnastics or in pictures and going to prom. And I felt like it was just always a concern. And I think that as I've gotten older, that's been something that, number one, I've had to intentionally work on it a lot, like work on body image in therapy and read books about body image and have lots of really open conversations with my friend about it, So I think I've worked on it a lot, but then also kind of naturally as I've gotten older, I think I've realized more and more that your body really isn't as important as you think it is when you're a teenager, because I think whenever you're in high school, the world that's in front of you is so small. Like I went to a high school that only had 1,000 people in it. And I think that it's really easy to look around and you're trying to think about like, okay, how can I have a successful life? How can I be happy? You kind of look around to differentiate yourself and you start to compare. And I think that in high school, how pretty you are for girls feels like it's like 90% of your value, because all you're really thinking about is like, do boys like me? Am I good at sports? Am I getting good grades? Your list of concerns is smaller. And I feel like in high school and kind of in college still, I feel like girls that were really beautiful or felt really confident about the way that they looked, I felt like they just were so much better off in life. And as I've gotten older, I've realized more like, oh no, like beauty fades very quickly. And, even the ability to like have people think that you're good looking, that doesn't really matter as much when you're 25 or 30 because people start to get married. And I think that just as I've gotten older, that's made up less and less of my like own personal value is, am I pretty as everyone else? So I think I was way too obsessed and worried about that when I was a teenager, but so many girls are. So I have to like, give myself some grace that I was so worried about that when I was 17.
It's really hard and constantly. I mean, everybody talks about this, but truly, like looking through social media and seeing the way that other people look and thinking, I don't look like that. And even understanding, like, I know this is edited, I know that, but you're not thinking about that when you're scrolling through or you're looking, you're just like, I wish that I looked like that. I wish that when other people were probably thinking that about you as well.
Right.
It's
And like I don't know to what extent the landscape is different for you now in high school cuz in some ways I feel like I'm like 80 years old. But then I'm like I was pretty recently, but I remember when I was in high school, Instagram was so the thing. And it was kind of like when I was in ninth grade, that was the first year that Instagram came out. So like in the first few years, like when I was like 16, 17, truly like if you were a girl that could get like more than 100 likes on an Instagram picture, like that was a big deal. And like I remember the first time when I was 16 that I got 100 likes on a picture and it was so validating for me, which is insane that like it was so tightly tied to those numbers when I was in high school.
yeah, it's such a, even if you don't want it to be, it feels very connected. You want the validation from that. You want the, it feels good to get a certain amount of likes, a certain amount of views or whatever it is. I love Instagram's new feature where you can choose that only you can see the number of likes on your post.
Yes.
I think I really like that, and I like when other people do that because I find myself looking to see how many people liked it, and when I can't see that, it makes me like, oh, at first like a little annoyed, and then like, okay, but I get it. Like I'm glad they did that. Like that was a good
Yeah,
choice.
yeah, like, oh, just kidding. That actually probably makes sense. Yeah, it'll be interesting. I think that kind of in the next 5, 10 years, we'll sort of have a reckoning where we go, okay, social media like destroyed everyone's mental health. So like, how do we like put this back together? And I think like personally, I think TikTok is an improvement from Instagram, and I'm hoping that the different mechanisms that we use for content will continue to improve and become more real, less polished and fake and
Okay, so what is your favorite quote, and in what way has it been influential in your life?
Ooh, okay. My favorite quote comes from Teddy Roosevelt, and it's a long poem, so I won't quote the whole poem, but the gist of it is the credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena. And what I've always interpreted this to mean is in life, it is so easy to critique and talk about other people. And I think that 99% of people in the world are watchers and discussers of other people. But I think that the credit, like life, is for the man in the arena, aka the person who's willing to put themselves out there. Because I think, like, we kind of touched on TikTok, like, I think that I feel so lucky. Like, truly, no one can plan to like go viral on TikTok, and so it was something where I felt like I just like won the lottery. But I also think that being in that spotlight and kind of having a national platform for the last 2 years or so, it's been interesting because a lot of people will say like, oh, I could do better, or they'll always have critiques or hate comments or feedback and that kind of stuff. And what I just told myself is like, everyone says that they can do it, but do they actually wake up in the morning and film themselves and put themselves out there? No, most people don't have the courage to even put themselves out there. And that's a lesson I really had to learn with even pageantry, going for Miss Utah. Lots of people can sit on their couch and eat potato chips and, talk about what girls should be doing. And at the end of the day, only a few people actually have the courage to go put themselves out there and chase it. And so anytime that I feel discouraged or I feel, just scared, like we all do when we go do vulnerable things, I just remind myself, like, everyone can point fingers, but it's better to be the person that's actually trying and struggling, even if you do fail.
Absolutely. It's really interesting you say that. I did a couple other interviews today, and someone else said that exact same quote. Which
Oh, really?
yeah,
Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
yeah. So I agree though. I think it's a great quote. I think yeah, I do a lot of theater, and so I can definitely relate to that feeling of like having an audience or someone who doesn't know anything about theater telling you like, oh, you should have done this or you should have done that, and it's just like, okay, but you weren't on stage, you weren't doing that, like you didn't put in this work for months to final product.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely very much I really like that, and I think that's really good advice too, is like, don't listen to people who just tell you that they could do better, tell you this is what you could do if they are not doing it, or don't have the experience, or don't really understand what goes into it, just thinks that they can do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a very dangerous mindset to have, to look at something without really understanding the work that goes into it and be like, oh, it's so easy to do that.
And I think too, like having the compassion for yourself that like just because you're out there, you don't have to be perfect, I think the best example of that I would say is House of Black, because our little like Harry Potter spin-off thing that we do, it was interesting because we did our first like 3 episodes and they all did perform super well. And after that, we were like, okay, we need to switch to a DSLR camera. We need to do scripts. We need to do like real voiceovers. Sorry, my boyfriend's knocking at the door. So we were like, okay, we're gonna change all these things about the format of how we do it. And we tried that for like 2 episodes, and we realized that it really, really slowed us down. And that actually, to like make the series successful, we had to make it kind of like crappy and just do it on an iPhone because it allowed us to get out episodes faster. And so it's been interesting, like, so anytime I get hate comments that are like, oh, the quality of this is so bad, or like, why isn't the timeline this, or why isn't the costumes that? I'm like, no, you don't understand. Like, it has to be kind of bad, because if we tried so hard to make it perfect, we wouldn't be able to do this. We wouldn't be able to put out like 20 episodes. It would have been like 5 minutes of really good footage,
Right.
So you kind of have to sometimes operate in that space of not as good as you want to be.
I really like the series. I think it's really good, and
Oh, good. I'm glad that you did.
I keep up with it. I think
Yeah.
it's crazy. I actually 5 minutes before I started this call, I have 2 of these like box lights, and just completely burned out. So to compensate, I now have like a stack of buckets, and like the top of my ring light, because it broke, is like sitting in the top bucket looking at me. So we have like
Like, how to make it work?
like not everything's gonna be perfect. So I'm looking at my setup here, and I'm like, yeah, that's this is true.
That's amazing. I love it.
Yeah, it's you know what, it's a Girl Scout skill, just adapt.
I love it. Gotta make it work.
Okay, so what is an example of a time you experienced failure, and what advice do you have for overcoming that feeling?
Lots of times, Christian, I love you, but you are in the shot in the mirror. Definitely the biggest time that I've experienced failure is competing for Miss Utah. Because I decided when I was 15 years old that I wanted to win Miss Utah. And so I started competing at pageants and lost for about 7 years before I finally, like, was able to win. And probably the biggest one happened in 2019. I ended up getting second runner up at Miss Utah and felt like I was just so close. And then I was going to drop out of the competition. I actually got engaged. I was going to get married. And like 2 weeks before, I had this sort of like epiphany where I realized that, like, even though everyone in my life was telling me that I was never going to win Miss Utah, like, I knew for myself that I had to follow this goal, like, till the end. Like, even if I didn't win, I had to prove it to myself that I would keep trying. And so luckily, and it ended up that in 2021, like, the stars aligned and it worked out that year. But I definitely had to go through a lot of years of losing that taught me a lot of humility and taught me, like, how bad I wanted it, that I had to come back over and over again.
Yeah, and it can be hard, and I that's amazing that you kept going back and kept trying again. It can be tough when you experience even something that may seem like failure to other people. Like, oh, but that's still really good. Like, oh, but you
Right.
still did really well. But it's like, okay, but by my standards, my personal standards, I wanted to do better, and I feel like I can do better. So yes, it may not have been bad, but I don't feel like it was my best performance, or I don't feel like it was my best foot forward. And
Yeah.
I definitely, again, going back to theater, that's something that's very prevalent, and people will say, oh, but it wasn't bad, or that role's not bad, that score isn't bad, but it can feel like, that it wasn't your personal best, or that you're capable of doing more. So I think just going back and trying again, yeah, I mean, until you feel like this is a score, this is something that that I feel like I worked for and earned, and I think that's a yeah, because it doesn't always happen on the first try.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so what person has been most influential in your life, and what is the most important lesson that you've learned from them? And this person can be real or fictional.
hmm I would. Oh, real or fictional? Oh, woof.
One of each.
I think I'll still stick with my mom, which is so cliche. But here's why: is my mom is actually an entrepreneur, and about the time that I was born, my mom started a company called Kid to Kid, that started with one thrift store that buys and sells children's clothing and toys like cribs and like diapers and toys and stuff. And that business has grown and grown, and now she has hundreds of stores all over the country, all over like Europe and different places. And so I've watched my mom my whole life scale this startup, into this big business. And I think that the thing that really influenced me about my mom is that she has this attitude that is so practical, that she just believes that she can do anything and she can learn anything. And she sort of passed that on to me. And the story I would tell is when I was like 12 years old, I decided that I wanted to be a fantasy author. That was like, like kind of coming off my Harry Potter reading for the first time. I was like, this is it. Like, I'm going to be the next J.K. Rowling, like whatever. And I like wrote up my first book, and I kind of went to my mom and I was like, okay, I want to publish this. And she was like, okay, yeah, go do that. Go. Like 12-year-old me. And so I was like, okay, so I get on Google and I'm like, how do you publish a book? And I, buy a book on like how to write a query letter. So I start like workshopping my query letter at age 12. And then I'm like, I need to get an agent. So I start sending out like hundreds of emails as a 12-year-old, like trying to get myself a literary agent. And like all of this stuff, and I still like have some of those like rejection letters that I saved. And it's funny, like looking back, obviously I didn't get a book deal. I was 12, I could barely write, but my mom never even for a moment was like, hey, you're only 12 years old, like who do you think that you're going to be the next J.K. Rowling? Like, she was like, absolutely, yeah, you can go do it. And that's been sort of my whole life. In some ways my mom is really hard on me and pushes me really hard, but she's also just had this expectation of, Sasha, you could literally do anything that you wanted to do, you just have to believe in yourself. And my mom has also been really a spiritual leader for me as well. And I think that something that I would credit to my success, it's not necessarily like a religion, but I think spiritually I've always learned to be very in tune with my intuition and with but like believing in my future and having goals and stuff. And I think that because my mom taught me how to be aligned in myself and how to really believe in myself, it's allowed me to pursue a lot of things that I would not have had the courage to do otherwise. And so definitely I'm a product of my mom. And it's interesting, like, seeing, I just had a conversation with her the other day, with her, my grandma, and we were talking about my great grandma, and thinking about how every generation, the opportunity provided to the different women has changed. And like, my grandma went from, she got married when she was like 16 because she got pregnant, in like the poorest town in Utah, in like Paraguna. And then, my mom was like the first one to go to college. And then, she raised me so that by the time that I was at this age, I could start a business when I'm 24, instead of she did it when she was like 50. So I'm definitely a product of the women that came before me. And it's really exciting that like, I'm finally in the right era with the right opportunity around me, that like, my mom has kind of set me up, that it's like, the world's your oyster, like go get whatever you want, because she gave me that confidence. So sorry, that was a really long-winded answer. I just love my mom.
No, I love that. I really appreciate that. And my mom is actually in the room with me.
Oh really? Oh, okay.
Yeah, for all of these interviews, she's here.
Oh good, we love a supportive mom.
Yeah, so I really love that. I also look up to my mom a lot, and yeah, I had a similar experience. My mom has always been so supportive of everything that I've gone after and everything that I've wanted to do. And yeah, it's a really special kind of bond, and it teaches you a lot too. It's like, oh wait, I can do that, maybe I can. I felt that way with Journey Strong too. I was just emailing people. I was like, well, I'll just try. I'll just email as many people as I can, and we'll see. And I emailed like 50 to 100 people, and like 6 responded. And I'm like, that's okay. But those 6 responded. Like, those 6 people responded. They were interested, and that's what mattered, and that's what's important. And yeah, just going after the things that you want, even if it seems unrealistic, because you really never know. Yeah, anything is possible. Anything can happen. Is it okay if I ask you one more question?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, definitely.
What book or movie or TV show or musical or play, etc., do you wish you'd been introduced to sooner in life?
Oh, do I wish I would have been introduced to sooner? Actually, have you seen The Queen's Gambit on Netflix?
I've heard about it.
Ooh, okay, that was a really good one. Let's see, I don't want to talk about that one because you haven't seen it. Let's see what I would have been introduced to sooner. Well, I probably have to say then Star Wars, because I definitely am a fake Star Wars fan that fell in love with Star Wars when I watched The Force Awakens. And so, I'm kind of like, speaking as someone who's like in the Star Wars fandom, I came into it backwards because I was like 19 years old. And I remember when I watched Kylo Ren and Rey for the first time, I was like, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen in my entire life. Where has Star Wars been my whole life? And then from that point, I just totally fell in love. And so I think definitely I would have probably introduced myself to Star Wars sooner. And more than that, I think I probably would have like owned my nerdy side in general sooner. Because I was always nerdy. Like, obviously when I was 12, I was writing like fantasy books. But then when I was in 9th grade, I moved schools to a new high school, and I went through, I don't know how to describe it other than I was a loser, like all throughout elementary school, junior high school, like, and when I say loser, I just mean socially like isolated, like just completely by myself. And when I moved that year in 9th grade, I decided like, I'm just gonna completely get rid of my personality and start over and just become likable, and everyone's gonna like me, and I'm just gonna be popular, and I'm just gonna start over. And so I literally I stopped writing, all of that stuff just kind of out the door, and I just built back up this really basic Utah girl personality. And it really wasn't until Star Wars when I was 19 that I fell in love with Star Wars again, and I went, oh my gosh, I forgot I love fantasy. I love this. This is what I loved when I was a kid. And then I moved to Disney like that next year, and while I was at Disney, I did like Jedi training. And that's when I just completely fell in love like with immersive storytelling and stuff, and started to sort of embrace my Star Wars side more. So I wish that that process would have happened earlier in my life, because I never would have thought that I would become like the Star Wars Harry Potter girl on the internet. Like, never, because I was totally hiding that for years. And that was very much a mistake, you know? Not a mistake, it was something I learned from, but something that I, you know, retrospectively am like, oh, I wish I could have just been myself during those years.
I love Star Wars. However, I am a Star Trek fan.
Oh! Okay, I love it.
Every time I was like Star Trek, Star Trek, Star Trek.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. I'm incredibly geeky, and it's my dad's fault. It's completely my dad's fault. I'm incredibly geeky, and I love it. And I kind of the same thing. I was like, is this okay for me to like go out, or for me to like be excited about? And I got over that really fast. So all throughout lower middle school, same thing you were talking about. I was like, you know, I'd get up on Sunday mornings, and my dad would wake up, and I would be watching Star Trek, the original series, just like in the living room for like hours before he got up. I was just like a 7, 8, 9-year-old. So I definitely, I love that, embracing the geeky side, and that immersive storytelling that you're talking about, just falling in love with it. And I completely agree. It's such a nice escape, especially during COVID and everything going on. Like, it's just such a great way to just kind of be done with the real world for a little bit, and just be totally immersed in a story that you love and connect with, and characters, and just the universe in itself. And I completely agree with you. Yeah.
Awesome, yeah.
Thank you so much for doing this. I have two more really quick questions for you.
Yeah, of course.
The first one is, what is your favorite Girl Scout cookie?
Okay. Oh, probably Thin Mints. Is that basic? That is basic, probably. But yeah. Yeah, classic.
Okay, I have to be honest. I feel like Thin Mints are a little bit overrated.
Oh, really?
But a way to make them not overrated is to, they're still really good. I just think I like the other cookies more. But if you crush up a sleeve of them and put them in a brownie mix and make Thin Mint brownies.
Oh, okay. I gotta try that now. I gotta get baking. I love that.
And my last question is there anyone else that you know that you think would be a good fit for this project that you can recommend to me or put me in contact with?
Ooh, yes. Okay, I would recommend Miss Teen Utah. Her name is Jocelyn Osmond. She's a good friend of mine if you want to do another one. I also have a friend, her name is Rebecca Rogers, and she is another creator on TikTok, and she's on teacher TikTok, and she does like teacher YouTube videos and stuff. She's really awesome and really nice, and it's also just a girl boss and a leader, and is super successful in her field. So she, I think, would be a cool person to talk to. And then I'm trying to think. Yeah, those are probably the two coolest ones that I can think of.
That's awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, oh my gosh, thank you. Is there anything else that you need from me, or anything else I can help you with?
No, I think that unless there's anything else you want to say, any other stories you want to share, or anything else that you want to add.
I think I should be good. I think you covered it. That was awesome.
Thank you so much for your time and for making this work. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. You're awesome. Good luck with your project, and just shoot me a message or a text if you need anything.